Ant-Man and the Wasp. So, here's a shocker. Just saw Black Panther, biggest film ever, Infinity War, and one of the biggest films of a century, in my opinion. We're going to have a long way to go before some big film breaks records like that one. But when you have a year like 2018 and Black Panther and Infinity War came out, and they're some of the most iconic, biggest films of our time, and then Ant-Man and the Wasp comes out afterwards, you can't help but feel underwhelmed by it, okay? It's a good movie. I enjoyed it. It has its moments. It's a fun time, but I'm just not going to get into it as much. I'm not going to come out with like, oh, this was a good movie too, because the entire time I'm watching that movie, I'm thinking about the events of Infinity War and how that plays out into this movie, and it's hard. In fact, I feel terrible that they released the film around that time. I mean, this is a kind of film I feel like you could have released it before Infinity War. I mean, spoiler alert, there's an end credits scene where a lot of Scott Lang's other, like all the other characters, like Hope Van Dyne, Hank Pym, and Hank's wife, they just turn to dust, which is really disturbing because the tone of the movie was a very fun, comedic, childish, in a good way. Like it's like that Seth Rogen comedy vibe, but with a big hint of just fun and adventure and just pure child-hearted humanity. And then it gives you an end credits scene where all of your favorite characters turn to dust. And it's like reminds you that, oh, I know you just saw a happy, lighthearted, fun movie, but it's but remember, this is the same universe where Infinity War happens, so your favorite character is going to turn to dust in this movie as well. So on the one hand, I thought that was hilariously jarring. Like, oh my god, you just killed off, like they're dead. You just killed off these characters who we just spent the past more than 2 hours having a child-hearted fun time with, and they just died. And Ant-Man got stuck in the quantum realm. Dear God. But it is okay. So anyway, just on this movie alone, after seeing it a second time for rewatching for Endgame and being able to watch it on its own merit, because enough time has passed and I can watch it without the recent intense shock of Infinity War. I can honestly say this is a very what I admire about this film is it is very, very unique and creative and different and separates itself from your typical summer movie lineup. We're so used to so many of these CGI films being so average, being the same thing, rehashing old stuff, never really taking risks, and this is a movie that feels like it took a lot of. It's once again what Marvel is willing to do is they take risks. They took risks with Guardians of the Galaxy, and it paid off. They took risks with Thor Ragnarok. They paid off. They took risks with Captain America Civil War, and that paid off. They took a risk with Doctor Strange, and that paid off. And now, once again, they're taking risks with Ant-Man and the Wasp, and it paid off. I think the most impressive thing about Marvel is that they take all these risks, and it pays off. It's not as simple as like a generic movie. They do take risks with these films. And it's easy to kind of look like, oh, they're probably just doing something that will be obvious and will get mass audiences. But the thing is with them is they're not doing that. Each film is a risk. Any one of those films could have turned out to be a disappointment or could have turned out to just not be successful, could have been a flop. But the reason is why those films work and why Ant-Man and the Wasp works is because they know how to diversify the tones of their movies. They're not all superhero films. You have a space adventure. You have a fantasy. You have like a political thriller. And in this film, you have a Seth Rogen comedy mixing, and this movie also it's the best example of embracing the science fiction B movie of the 1950s and 60s. This movie embraces things like the quantum realm, Ant-Man and the Wasp, becoming smaller, so you have giant ants in these positions, and then you have these other like things like Giant Man walking around, and also things like entering the quantum realm, what it's like to be in this and creating these huge giant sci-fi tunnels that take you you're in these like small spaceships, or these small like ships that take you into the quantum realm, because they shrink you down smaller and smaller to where you're small enough to go into the quantum realm and go subatomic. And the movie really embraces that sci-fi B-movie comic book kind of lore. And Ant-Man and the Wasp does that. The story pretty much surfaces around Hope's, or the Wasp, also named Hope, and is finding her mother. Hank is finding her wife. That's the story, is them trying to find their wife. And we also see this is the final movie that this is also the final movie that references Civil War, because Ant-Man was in Civil War as Giant Man, and because of that he's put under house arrest. And what I love about the opening is, like, because he's under house arrest, he has to like entertain his daughter whenever his daughter comes over. So the film opens up with this like crazy I can't even explain it. It's like a bunch of boxes put together, and he created like a maze, like a fun house kind of maze out of boxes. And it's so creative and funny, and I could never explain it and do it justice. But it's obviously made out of cardboard boxes, so it doesn't look perfect, but it looks so creative. It looks so fun. You really see that Scott Lang isn't just an idiot. He may seem lesser than the other Avengers, but he still has some credibility in terms of his technical skills and his creativity and how smart he can be. And this movie is just beaming with genuine comedy, genuine laughs. You have your cast supporting characters like Michael Pena and T.I., and that third guy with a European accent, I forget his name, but he's also very funny. And the trio are basically working with Scott Lang to, they were all criminals, but now they want to change their act. So they are starting up their own security business where they create security tech, and their name is Ex-Con Consultants. And it's cool, it's funny, it's genuine. I like how the comedy, it stems from a very real place, because again, that's the thing that makes Ant-Man different from other MCUs and makes him an original kind of hero, is he's just a guy who just wants to live his life and start this security business with his friends, and they all don't want to be, criminals anymore. And so he's this guy who just wanted to live his life and be there for his daughter and his family. And so he's put into these circumstances, and he's given the opportunity to be the Ant-Man because he does it to be the hero, to be the good guy, to be the hero that his daughter sees him as. And it's inspiring in that way. And it's funny because because Paul Rudd does that so well. He is sort of us in that way. Like, we all aspire to be like Iron Man. We all can relate to Captain America with some of the struggles of life. But we are Paul Rudd. The truth is, we're all Paul Rudd as Ant-Man. We're all that guy who's kind of out of his league in certain circumstances, but we still have some technicalities, so we can still somehow make it through all the craziness that happens. And this movie does that really well. The villain isn't even really a villain. I mean, we have multiple characters in this. You have Walter Goggins who plays this black market businessman, kind of a black arms dealer kind of guy. And it's funny to see how he's supposed to be the businessman, his henchman, and it's funny because of how he plays it in a very like southern twang, like he's supposed to be treating himself as serious, but it's Walter Goggins, so he takes that serious portrayal, and you just see the comedy, the way he freaks out and panics when he's in a car chase, and then like stuff in the car chase is happening where some things become big, some things become small, and there's a lot of creativity with how they play those superpowers, they play those tech stuff, and it's great in that way. And the other, I guess, villain would be Ghost, which is this female character who can pretty much phase through different. She's like a ghost. She can phase her body through the other people and to other things and move in that way, and also fight that way. She can become a solid and then punch, and then if somebody's punching back at her, she can just turn into like a ghost, and now their punch doesn't just go through them. And so it's like a really creative kind of fight choreography that's done with that, and it's done really well, and it's interesting design as well. So, and because it also kind of, it's like, it looks like the design's like 4 eyes and no mouth and like a cloak, and it kind of gives you that insect kind of a villain, which makes sense because this whole movie's Ant-Man and the Wasp, and it embraces the idea of insects. And so I admire this movie for that, because once again, it's different. You know, I'm not going to get another Captain America or another Iron Man film. I'm going to get Ant-Man, and it's different for that. I appreciate it for being different like that. And I think that another good thing about this movie is just how wacky it is. I mean, there's a scene in the movie where they're in a car chase scene, and there's a motorcycle coming right at them. To stop them, they take a pink Hello Kitty Pez dispenser, and then they throw it at the motorcycle, and then they throw a device at the Pez dispenser so it becomes huge. So now you have a scene where a motorcycle guy is just going after them, and it gets hit by a giant Hello Kitty Pez dispenser. At that point, that's where that scene lets you know, okay, is this the kind of film you're gonna get into or not? And I love the movie simply because, and that's just one example of how creative this movie can be, but simply because it is that creative. I never thought in my life I would ever see a movie where in a car chase, a motorcycle is hit with a giant Hello Kitty Pez dispenser, and that's how the heroes get away. But man, I thank Marvel for being creative enough to take risks like that, because they don't care about just making average movies to make a lot of money. They care about just having fun with their movies. Let's do something different. Let's do something fun. Let's do something creative. And that's what this movie is. It's a celebration of creativity. It's a celebration of, let's just do something different. Let's not get bored. Let's not play it safe. Let's take chances. And Ant-Man and the Wasp is a great film for doing that. So I highly recommend it, because I can never properly explain the creativity of that film. It is definitely worth a watch, for sure.